So I don't know if this is going to show up. I'm only on YouTube now because it's just a mess. Anyway. Hey, Mimi. You smell. You have stinky breath. Stinky cat breath, right? Who's got stinky cat breath? Yeah, so, oh my god, that was like for an hour of just me talking to nobody. So, anyway, one of the greatest things though, one of the more interesting things that it pointed out for me. So, was the following. So, let's see. I haven't been on X in a couple of weeks because I find it kind of boring. The Federation trusts the Corpus the most. Now this is where your world building becomes politically dangerous in the best possible way, because you've moved beyond culture shock and into legitimacy. Why Starfleet is starting to trust the Corpus? Trust doesn't form ideology. It forms from pattern recognition, and the pattern so far is, the Corpus warned about the infested. They were right. They warned about the Grenier. They were right. They warned about the warframes. They were right. And not just right in abstract terms, right in measurable outcomes. Starfleet vessels that ignored these warnings suffered. Starfleet vessels that coordinated with Corpus advisories survived. That shifts perception fast. The quiet power move, unbilled assistance, Corpus ships appearing in combat and not charging. That's brilliant, because that's not altruism. It's long-term market strategy. They're not saying we are good. They're demonstrating we are reliable. Stability is the most valuable currency in interstellar politics. The Federation values trust. The Corpus understands that. So they invest in it. That is extremely on brand. Now the real tension, the Lotus. If she appears, if she breaks, if she speaks of balance, if she frames the Tenno as protectors, if she wait, let me say this again, okay? So if the Lotus were to suddenly appear in my conflict between the Federation and the Corpus, right? Now the real tension, the Lotus. If she appears, if she speaks of balance, if she frames the Tenno as protectors, if she appeals to moral authority, who does Starfleet trust? The faction that warned them accurately, assisted them materially, shared technology, engaged in structured trade, appeared in defense without invoice, or the entity tied to the warframes, unpredictable intervention, high collateral damage, moral ambiguity. Starfleet would not automatically trust the Lotus. They would investigate, and the Corpus would quietly provide documentation, battle records, infested containment data, Grenier brutality archives, warframe intervention casualties. They would not shout. They would present evidence. Starfleet values evidence. That's the key. Why the Corpus are winning the long game. They aren't trying to become Federation citizens. They don't need to. They need trade integration, legal recognition, political access, market stability, a council seat without citizenship. That is extremely plausible in a century-scale arc, because the Federation doesn't just admit planets, it admits stakeholders. And if the Corpus supply critical medical tech, supply viable anti-Grenier weaponry, provide reliable military coordination, become consistent treaty behavior, then become too important to exclude, even if they remain culturally incompatible. The dangerous future. Here's where things get fascinating. If the Federation grows dependent on Corpus weapons for Grenier engagement, Corpus medical engineering for frontier colonies, Corpus industrial infrastructure for rapid repairs, then political leverage shifts, not through conquest, through utility. and the Federation would have to reconcile something uncomfortable. They are partnering with a hyper-capitalist, profit-driven technocracy whose ethics are contract-based rather than consent-based. And yet, they've been honest, repeatedly. That destabilizes Starfleet's moral certainty. If the Lotus shows up, Starfleet would not dismiss her, but they would ask, "Where were you when we needed warning? Where were you when the infested spread? Where were you when Grineer armor rendered our weapons useless?" The Corpus were there, and that's powerful. So that's the coolest, best irony in the whole thing. The best irony in all of it is the simple fact that when you play Warframe, you believe that the Lotus is the good guy, right? You work with the Lotus. Lotus is space mommy, right? You're the Tenno. But in a conflict, in a universe where the Corpus discover the Federation, right? The Federation will trust the Corpus. Because the Corpus will come to them and be like, because the Corpus aren't, we have to keep in mind that the Corpus have existed for at least 1,000 years, probably longer. They are experts on the market. They are experts on selling things. They are experts on forming a stable market. They aren't stupid. So they come into the Federation. They don't want to conquer the Federation. They know from the moment, pretty fast, the Corpus know they cannot win against the Federation. It will be a long and bloody conflict, don't get me wrong. The Starfleet officers will lose a lot. So both sides will lose, but in the long run, because there's a lot less Corpus than Federation, the Federation will probably win. But it will be a very long, brutal, unpleasant conflict. And the Corpus don't want that. The Corpus also don't need Federation membership to sell and trade with the Federation. Because they don't want to be Federation. To become Federation means you have to change who they are. And at their core, the Corpus violate everything that the Federation is. From basic biology, the Corpus engage in genetic engineering. So at one point, they point out that the 14, 15-year-old Corpus, right, can never join the Federation. He was genetically modified as a child. All of them, the majority of them were born genetically modified and then probably modified later with added genetic modifications to be part of the Corpus. Every one of the Corpus is genetically modified. I mean, they have glowing eyes, which is alone an augmentation that probably Starfleet would not approve of. You cannot remove the genetic engineering and purpose breeding out of the Corpus without changing the Corpus on a fundamental level. So everything about the Corpus makes it impossible for them to join the Federation and remain Corpus. And the majority of the Corpus who live for centuries are not eligible for Federation citizenship. Flat out, they cannot join the Federation. You have people who are going to live for hundreds of years who cannot be changed. So basically you have an entire society that's basically incapable of joining the Federation. Whether they want to or not, they cannot. Now the Corpus don't want to join the Federation. They look down on the Federation. They consider the Federation decadent and wasteful and have so they don't even want to join it. They consider them weak because they do not engage in genetic engineering. Their ships look like nurseries. I had one Corpus call the Federation ships, nursery ships, right? They have carpets and soft walls, and they don't wear magnetic boots or any of that. They consider them weak and soft. So the Corpus doesn't even want to. What the Corpus wants is what makes the Corpus, which is they want profit. So they come out of the origin system, they start exploring the Federation, and they want to trade. They start to trade with the Ferengi, because they and the Ferengi have a lot in common. They trade with the Romulans, and they start trading with border colonies of the Federation. Border colonies that do not get supplies in time, do not have weapons in time. They start trading. Now the Corpus find out really fast that Starfleet doesn't have money. So instead, what do they trade for? Resources they need. They trade for, dilithium rights, okay? They trade for mining rights. They trade for supplies and resources, and they give them guns. So they trade them, they make guns and trade them for resources, right? They start developing trade networks with everyone throughout the Federation. Because Corpus have better weapons that are suited for Grineer, but also just better weapons. Corpus are skilled at weapons. They have better medicine, right? So even Starfleet realizes that not all Corpus medicine violates Federation law. Some of it does not. So even Starfleet realizes, I have cat fur in my mouth, that they can trade the Corpus for their medicine and their weapons. So they even start trading with the Federation, but they're not a part of it. However, over time, the Federation starts to rely on Corpus technology, and so they work their way in because the Corpus know that's what they're good at. It's a market. They start selling. I had the junior doctor start working on stimulant patches, and he at one point goes up to Tico and crew and is like, "Blind boxes. Let me introduce you to blind boxes." So eventually, the Federation is going to have so much trade going on between them and the Corpus that they have to give Frode Beck a seat on the Federation Council. There won't be members. They can never be members of the Federation. But that's what makes the Corpus so great. Yeah, I was down. I didn't even realize I had been down for a while until I checked. And I don't even know if I'm going down or not. So I got to keep checking to make sure I'm not down, right? So the Corpus come to the Federation and they're like, all right, we're the Corpus, right? We are the Corpus. Like, let us warn you about 3 things. Okay, first, the Grineer. First off, your weapons will be useless against the Grineer. They're like, don't even try to talk with the Grineer. The Grineer have one goal and one goal only, right? What is their goal? They want to wipe you out. The Grineer don't have warp. So what they do is they set out distress. They start stealing warp-driven ships and trying to figure out how to work it. But at one point, they're like, do not even bother trying to communicate with the Grineer. And the Federation are like, no. We always talk first. We don't shoot first. I don't know. Honestly, I haven't really thought about it. I don't even know the details yet about it because I've been so busy with my Corpus Warframe stuff. That's why I don't know. I gotta think. I gotta figure out what's going on. I don't even know what the victory you're talking about is because I just know something was going on with Iran. So when you said victory, I don't even know. I'll admit. But anyway, but that aside, right? So they go to the Corpus go to the Federation and they're like, okay, we have 3 things to warn you about, okay? 1, we have to warn you about the Grineer. And so the Federation runs into the Grineer. The Grineer comes in, weapons blazing, and basically slaughters Starfleet. So they're like, oh shit. Hey, Primal One. So, Primal One. Okay. Primal One. So, the funny thing is Primal One, right? The Primal One. One of the really funny things about the whole thing about my whole Starfleet Federation Corpus thing is, which is so funny, it's good to see you, Primal One. What's funny, though, is when we play Warframe, right? We view the Lotus as the good guy, right? We are on the side of the Lotus. The funny thing is, if Starfleet were to interact with the Corpus, right? They won't trust the Lotus. They will actually trust the Corpus. There's this really... Okay? So think about, okay? The Federation trusts the Corpus the most, right? Now this is where your world building becomes politically dangerous in the best possible way. Because you've moved beyond culture shock and into legitimacy. Okay? Because you've moved beyond culture shock and into legitimacy. Why Starfleet is starting to trust the Corpus. Trust doesn't form from ideology. It forms from pattern recognition. And the pattern so far is, the Corpus warned about the infested. And they were right. They warned about the Grineer. And they were right. They warned about the Warframes. And they were right. And not just right in abstract terms, right in measurable outcomes. Starfleet vessels that ignored those warnings suffered. Corpus advisories survived. So Starfleet vessels that ignored those warnings suffered. Starfleet vessels that coordinated with Corpus advisories survived. That shifts perception fast. The quiet power move. Unbilled assistance. Corpus ships appearing in combat and not charging. That is brilliant, because that's not altruism. That's long-term market strategy. They're not saying we are good. They're demonstrating we are reliable. Stability is the most valuable currency in interstellar politics, which is what the Corpus value. The Federation values trust. The Corpus understands that, so they invest in it. That is extremely on brand from the canon, right? Now the real tension, the Lotus. If she appears, if she speaks of balance, if she frames the Tenno as protectors, if she appeals to moral authority, who does Starfleet trust? The faction that warned them accurately, assisted them materially, shared technology, engaged in structured trade, appeared in defense without invoice, or the entity tied to the warframes? Unpredictable intervention, high collateral damage, moral ambiguity. Starfleet would not automatically trust the Lotus. They would investigate, and the Corpus would quietly provide documentation, battle records, infested containment data, Grineer brutality archives, warframe intervention casualties. They would not shout. They would present evidence, and Starfleet values evidence. That's the key. Why the Corpus are winning the long game. They aren't trying to become Federation citizens. They don't need to. They need trade integration, legal recognition, and political access, market stability. A council seat without citizenship? That is extremely plausible in a century-scale arc, because the Federation doesn't just admit planets, it admits stakeholders. And if the Corpus supply critical medical tech, supply viable anti-Grineer weaponry, provide reliable military coordination, maintain consistent treaty behavior, they become too important to exclude. Even if they remain culturally incompatible, the dangerous future. Here's where this gets fascinating. If the Federation grows dependent on Corpus weapons for Grineer engagement, Corpus medical engineering for frontier colonies, Corpus industrial infrastructure for rapid repairs, then political leverage shifts. Not through conquest, through utility, and the Federation would have to reconcile something uncomfortable. They are partnering with a hyper-capitalistic, profit-driven technocracy whose ethics are contract-based rather than consent-based. And yet, and this is the best part, and yet they've been honest repeatedly. That destabilizes Starfleet's moral certainty. Corpus have been repeatedly honest with them. So that's like, okay, so we are allying ourselves with someone we completely disagree with on moral grounds, and yet every single time they've been honest with us. If the Lotus shows up, Starfleet would not dismiss her, but they would ask, where were you when we needed warning? Where were you when the infested spread? Where were you when Grineer armor rendered our weapons useless? The Corpus were there, and that's powerful. And that's just awesome. I love it because it hit me today. I'm like, damn, what if because right now the Lotus has no role. She does not have warp, right? She doesn't have warp drive. So basically the Lotus is stuck in the origin system. She would walk into the Federation Council and see Frode Beck sitting with the Federation. And they would be like, who are you? And they're like, she is the one who controls the warframes. And the Federation would be like, you mean those things that come onto our ships and slaughter our people? The Corpus, on the other hand, are brilliant, and that's the thing that we have to always take into account, is that the Corpus have been running the market for centuries. The moment they enter into the Federation market, they will completely take it over. They will come in and be like, well, you see, we have these, these Grineer, your guns don't work against it. We've got weapons. And we'll take dilithium as payment for those weapons. We understand you don't have credits. We'll take your dilithium. We'll take mining rights to different planets. We'll take resources. We'll take replicator technology instead. And that's the best part of the whole thing. It was like, damn, the Federation will not want anything. In fact, they might even view the Lotus as a war criminal. Because she uses children to kill people.
The enemy is at our doorstep. You must defend our equipment until reinforcements arrive.
And the best part is, Primal One, I actually managed to get a Starfleet officer. The funniest part of all is, okay, the Corpus will accept Starfleet working for them. They will hire Starfleet. The Federation will never accept Corpus citizens. So I actually got a Starfleet doctor, my chief medical officer, as an employee of Beckco, the company of Frode Beck. Because through a clerical error, he ends up on their payroll. And he doesn't realize it at first. But then he starts talking to one of the Corpus. And he's like, you're on the payroll. They just haven't paid you because you don't have an account to transfer the funds to. It was done because the Corpus, in order to integrate their medicine, so the Corpus are going to sell Federation medicine, right? They're more advanced medicine. But in order for them to be able to use it, they need to explain it to them and have intercultural like cooperation, right? So they have a Corpus engineer working in their engineering department, Corpus security officers working with Federation security, and a Corpus junior doctor working with the chief medical officer. And the chief medical officer is looking into the junior doctor's pay. It's a long story. But he notices, they're like, but he's looking at it with a Corpus, with Kai. And Kai goes, wait a minute, you have, they hired you. He's like, I never applied for a job. It's like, no, but to make bookkeeping easier, they hired you. They actually owe you a paycheck. So because the Corpus like rituals, they actually indoctrinate. And the irony, so the Corpus are like, all right, instead of fixing that and going, all right, we're not going to hire a Starfleet officer as part of Beckco, right, under Frode Beck, they go, you know what? Let's make it official. So they have a whole induction ceremony, bringing him into Beckco, making him an official Corpus employee. And Starfleet is like, we can't refuse it. If we do, we look rude. On the other hand, we can't have our chief medical officer working for the Corpus. But they're like, there's a precedent. Benjamin Sisko as emissary to the prophets. So they're like, all right, Elias Halverson, you are now part-time employee of Beckco. And they pay him well because he's a chief medical officer. So they give him the senior doctor's pay. It's hilarious. And because the Corpus also know that they will never, ever be welcome in the Federation because of their genetic engineering. So they do it on purpose as a kind of spit in the face to the Federation. Like, you call yourself inclusive, you call yourself open and tolerant, and yet you will not accept us, but we will accept you. So Elias Halverson is now part-time working for the Corpus. And the thing is, because they're in the origin system, because they're not in the origin system, let me correct that. So I figure because the Corpus, we know the Corpus have long rituals, right? Every time they get a whole crew of new hires, they have a long ritual to bring them into the new company. Well, they're not in the origin system, so they have only one new hire, and that is the chief medical officer of the USS Athena. So he's like, yeah, so we're going to have a 16-hour ceremony, and it's going to be transmitted to our entire ship. And it's going to be transmitted to your ship as well. And it's going to be only you. So he's like, has to stand there under the statue of Parvos Granum and listen to long speeches and ritual and oaths being taken as it becomes a part of the Corpus. And it's hilarious because it 100% fits canon. The Corpus will welcome anybody in if you can prove you could be profitable. But the Starfleet will not accept the Corpus because they are genetically engineered. So I'm not breaking any canon at all. They wouldn't have a problem with Starfleet officers saying, yeah, you know what, I wouldn't mind working for the Corpus. But if a 16-year-old Corpus were to go up to Starfleet and be like, I want to join Starfleet, they'd be like, no. Why? Because you've been genetically engineered. but it was done as a
Very
child.
impressive, Tenno.
Nope,
You held
you're
them
not
all back.
welcome.
Time to get out of here.
And it's like, well, if you can reverse it, there's no reversing it. You can't just reverse the genetic engineering. So I've managed to find this ridiculous. It's really, really interesting. There's also one I have to find. It is hilarious where he asked them, because I figured that the Corpus have modified. They don't have they don't have a libido kind of thing, so they genetically engineered that out. So he has this whole thing with him that is so ridiculously, hilariously funny. He also gets into that he was from. The other day I found out he was from Texas. I found out. Who? Gene Roddenberry, you mean? You mean Gene Roddenberry? Because, yeah, I knew he was No, or do you mean James Doohan? Because I think James Doohan was a World War II vet. Who? Yeah, I think he was also a World War II vet. I know James Doohan. Did you know Scotty was missing 2 fingers? That's why he didn't sew his hands. The other best part is the Corpus teenager goes up to the ship's counselor and tells her she should become meat crew because that's more useful than being a counselor. And he even fills out the application for her, and he's like, all you need to do is sign it, and you can now be meat crew, which is more useful than being ship's counselor. He's not even being rude. It's just Corpus being Corpus. He's like, I've noticed you have no benefit at all. One sec. One sec. This is. It takes a moment. Let me find it. Because I had that whole argument back and forth with him and the counselor, and at one point he comes in and he's like, "You will not remove him." Oh yeah, here it is. Elias had just sat down in his office when the door chimed once and opened without waiting for acknowledgement. Tiquette entered carrying a slate. He did not sit. He rarely did. Commander Halverson, he began evenly, Corpus Medical has circulated a behavioral advisory regarding Starfleet personnel. Elias didn't look up immediately. That sounds ominous. It's precautionary. That made Elias look up. Tiquette stepped forward and placed the slate on the desk, rotating it for visibility. The header read, Intercultural Biological Variance Notice, Federation Personnel. Elias closed his eyes briefly. What is it this time? Tiquette read from the slate. Starfleet officers exhibit cyclic hormonal fluctuation consistent with persistent reproductive readiness. Corpus medical personnel are advised that Federation humans may initiate unscheduled pair bond attempts. Elias stared at him. Unscheduled? Yes. Tiquette continued reading with perfect seriousness. Unlike Corpus gestational protocols, Federation reproduction occurs through direct biological interaction. This may occur without contractual prearrangement. Elias leaned back slowly in his chair. Who wrote this? It originated from cultural integration. Of course it did. Tiquette kept going. Starfleet personnel may display prolonged ocular fixation proximity reduction, or invitation to shared caloric intake as preliminary mating indicators. From the hallway outside, someone burst into laughter and then immediately fled. Elias rubbed his temples. "They're not mating indicators," he muttered. "They are classified here as..." Oh God. Oh God. "They are classified here as heat-adjacent behavioral signals." Have a good one. Have a good one. Elias blinked. "Heat-adjacent?" "Yes." Tiket glanced up from the slate. "The advisory states that Federation humans appear to remain in a near-constant reproductive readiness state compared to regulated Corpus cycles." Elias stared at him. "We don't have cycles." "You do not suppress them." "That's not the same thing." Tiket studied him carefully. "Are you currently in a reproductive cycle?" "Are you currently in a Elias choked. "No!" Tiket frowned faintly. "The memo indicates it may not be externally obvious." "I am not in heat," Elias said flatly. Tiket nodded once, filing that. Understood. He glanced back at the slate. Corpus medical personnel are advised to maintain professional boundaries and avoid unintentional genetic... Corpus medical personnel are advised to maintain professional boundaries and avoid unintentional genetic entanglement. Elias leaned forward slowly. "Genetic entanglement? Yes. That is what happens when two compatible organisms reproduce," Tiket said calmly. "I am aware." Tiket tilted his head slightly. "Do you intend to initiate reproductive behavior with any genetically compatible females aboard this vessel?" Keep in mind, this is a Corpus doctor talking to a Federation chief medical officer. Do you intend to initiate reproductive behavior with any genetically compatible females aboard this vessel?" Elias stared at him in disbelief. "No!" "Have you already done so?" "No!" "Do you have offspring assigned to the nursery?" "No!" Tiket nodded once. "That simplifies monitoring." Elias exhaled. "Monitoring?" "The advisory recommends observation for escalation indicators." "I am not escalating." "That is consistent with your current hormonal baseline." Elias closed his eyes. "Tiket." "Yes?" "Starfleet officers are not animals." I did not state you were animals." "I did not state you were animals. You described us as if we were livestock." Tiket considered that. "The memo compares Federation reproductive spontaneity to unmanaged mammalian systems." "That's worse!" "Artificial gestation ensures optimal genetic selection. Pair bond reproduction introduces variance." "Introduces family," Elias corrected. "Family is socially constructed." "Yes, that is inefficient." "Not to us." Tiket's brow furrowed. "You allow reproduction without contract?" "Yes." "You allow pairing without productivity alignment?" "Yes." "You allow emotional selection?" "Yes." He studied Elias very carefully. "That's unstable." "It's human." Tiket processed that. "The advisory implies Federation officers may attempt pair bond initiation with available females in proximity." "I am not going to attempt anything." "Understood." He paused. "Engineer Kip has also been included in this advisory." Elias looked sharply. "Why?" "He has received multiple meal invitations." Elias dropped his head into his hands. "Of course he has." Tiket watched him with clinical interest. Corpus Medical has classified Starfleet as being in perpetual... Corpus Medical has classified Starfleet as being in perpetual heat-adjacent state. That is not a thing. It is now. Elias looked back slowly. Tiket? Yes? You understand what flirting is? No. You understand what dating is? You understand what dating is? It appears to be a pre-reproductive negotiation ritual. It appears to be a Elias inhaled deeply. It is not heat. It resembles unmanaged mating prelude. It is not unmanaged. You do not regulate it. That's because we don't need to. Tiket hesitated. You appear to require frequent biological discharge. Elias stared at him. We do not. That contradicts advisory language. The advisory language is wrong. Tiket considered that. Then with absolute seriousness, Commander Halverson, if you do enter a reproductive cycle, I would... Oh, God. Oh, God. Again, keep in mind, this is a 16-year-old Corpus talking to a 42-year-old Starfleet doctor. Commander Halverson, if you do enter a reproductive cycle, I would appreciate notification so I might adjust shift assignments accordingly. There was a beat of complete silence. Elias leaned back in his chair and looked at the ceiling. I am not going into heat. Understood. Tiket nodded, satisfied. He turned toward the door, then paused. One additional clarification. Elias didn't move. If Starfleet officers reproduce at will, does that reduce combat readiness? No! It seems distracting. It's not! Tiket studied him one last time. That is biologically inefficient. Good night, Tiket. It is 1400 hours. Go! Tiket left. In the hallway outside, two nurses immediately scattered. Elias sat in silence for several seconds. Then he muttered very quietly, perpetual heat. And somewhere in the Corpus's network, a memo had ensured that secret... And the thing is, this is hilarious, and like I said about Starfleet Academy, this is actually 100% believable. You can actually see a Corpus studying the humans of Starfleet and going, they appear to engage in preheat rituals involving caloric intake and trying to be like, are you in heat, Commander Halverson? He's like, I'm not in heat. And in fact, they came up because one of the Corpus is Kip Tatch, and Kip is working in engineering on the Starfleet vessel. And he's handsome. He's young, he's 48, but he looks to be about 20 because he's Corpus. So he's 48, he looks to be about 20. He's very polite. Yes, and that's the problem with Starfleet Academy. They can't do it. So at one point, the officer, Ensign, they call him on the Federation vessel, they call him Ensign Tatch. But his name is Kip, and he's a tech second class. And he's like, Commander Halverson, your females continuously ask me for and he's like completely baffled by it. The other really good one was when Kat finds out that the U.S. Okay, it's the Athena. The only reason it's called the Athena is because it was a joke. All right, it's not girl power or anything. It's the Athena. It's been the Athena for a while. Okay, so he asks them. He's like, Commander Halverson, your vessel is like the name. It's gonna take me a while to find it. He's like, your vessel is named after like a divine being, and the caduceus, which is used in Starfleet medical, is associated with Hermes. So at one point, rumor reaches the captain that the chief medical officer is talking about, the Corpus are concerned. Yeah, I keep getting booted. They're like, you have, your gods. Do you do rituals to Hermes and Athena? And so the Corpus become concerned that they're trying to, convert them to the worship of Athena and Hermes. So the captain calls the chief medical officer into her office, and she's like, Commander Halverson, the Corpus are concerned that you are, like, you know, I can't remember the exact wording, the worship of Hermes, and that you're trying to convert them into polytheism. Like, their command is questioning us about it. And he's like, I'm not trying to get them to worship Hermes. And then later, and at one point she's like, Commander Halverson, are you a polytheist? And he's like, no, Captain, I'm not a polytheist. I don't worship Athena. And that's one of my issues with Starfleet Academy. It's like, if you do it well, if you stick to characters, I mean, the culture shock alone between the Corpus and the Federation are priceless. Because there's some really, like, the Corpus lived for centuries. So at one point, they find out that the chief medical officer is 42. And the captain has to ban them from telling the Corpus their ages, because the Corpus are like, wait a minute, your chief medical officer is 42. He's a juvenile. But that's my issue with Starfleet Academy, where it's like, if you actually do humor, you can do it well. There's several moments that were just so funny, and they fit the characters perfectly. I can't remember them all, but it's like there's these several moments that are just where the culture shock and the culture exchange between the two are hilarious. But, and that's why. Anyway, so like I said, I managed to get the chief medical officer of the USS Athena is now a BECCO employee, and it won't, but one sec. I gotta post that on X. I haven't been posting on X because I've been trying to. So like, I had a Warframe attack come through, and the Warframe it's during a joint mission between where the Federation is the Starfleet are working with the Corpus to basically, it's a not a sabotage, a mobile defense mission, right? It's basically a mobile defense mission. The Corpus are going to, so they realize, the Federation realizes the best way to deal with the Grineer is containment. The Grineer do not have a lot of access to warp, so they're trying to contain them in the origin system. And they're trying to destroy their cloning ability. So the Corpus decide to work with the Federation to do a mobile defense mission, and they're doing it. So it's not a Warframe mobile defense mission, it is a Corpus mobile defense mission to steal information on locations of Grineer cloning facilities. And they have one team that's kept back and another team that's going to go forward and clear things, and then the team that's going to, hack the system follows. And the teenagers among them, the Tiket Taros with them, and Elias, and they have a team of Starfleet and Corpus. And the Warframe suddenly appears at the back, at the end, basically the Warframe appears at the beginning of the mission, right? And slaughters them. Basically kills, I think it was like 4 Starfleet officers other than Elias. Okay, because he's in the back, so he doesn't get hit immediately by the Warframe. The thing, before the Warframe even realizes what it's done, it kills the majority of the Starfleet officers so fast and so thoroughly, there's nothing left of the Starfleet officers. Basically, their bodies are beyond recognition. 2 Corpus are killed and 3 are severely injured, including the young junior doctor, Tiket Taro, is severely injured. And the only one left standing is the Federation Chief Medical Officer, because then the Warframe notices a strange human dressed in strange clothing that doesn't look Corpus, but is working with Corpus. So it scans him and leaves him standing to be like kind of like a warning, to tell his people about what happened. So Elias is like, the Corpus were right. Avoid the warframes. But the majority of the time, they're able to avoid the warframes because the warframes are limited to the origin system. So they have very few run-ins. But the Corpus, being Corpus, discover Federation deflector technology and use Federation deflector technology with their own nullifier technology to create shields that go around vessels that prevent the warframes from using their abilities on their ships. Which is kind of awesome. So yeah, I'm trying to think. I've been just. Sorry about that. But it's just it.
Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching.
But I do think that's one of the biggest problems we have with Star Trek right now is the lack of adversity, right? The lack of, the lack of conflict, the lack of people who don't agree with the Federation. And so it really adds so much more depth to it, where it's like, and that's why the Chief Medical Officer is such a great character, because unlike a lot of the, wait. Yes. Because so let me find it. There's a point where I posted it on X where it compares the Corpus and the Ferengi. Because everybody thinks of the Ferengi when they think of capitalists, right? But the Corpus actually scare them. I had this really great thing where they compare, and it'll take me a moment to find it, where where it compares the two, and it even has a conversation between it'll take me a moment to find it, but it compares the two, and it points out that Corpus actually terrified the Corpus actually terrified the Ferengi. Because they're actually more extreme, but they're also a different form of extreme.
Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching.
I'm going to go down, damn it. But it points out that when it comes down to it, the Ferengi don't worship prophets, right? The Ferengi like profit, they like owning stuff, they like showing off stuff. The Corpus will sacrifice anything and everything in the name of profit. They worship profit. It's their entire guidance, their entire life, everything they do for profit. So it was this really great comparison.
Another job well executed.
Because when faced with Corpus genetic engineering, where is it? It was pretty early on, because it was really good, because it really explained the differences between the two. And it's subtle, but it's a very, very important difference. Oh, and the Corpus is a Federation-recognized religion. Where is it? let's see, where's it? Vulcans versus the Vulcans versus the Beta Zeds. Corpus versus. It's around here. I almost is okay. Sorry. I have it. Because it really, I said, it brings things. I know how to do it. So basically, it's this. They're not Ferengi, all right? The Corpus are what the Ferengi pretend to be. So the Ferengi love profit, but they also love comfort. They love celebration. They love luxury. They love living. The Corpus didn't love profit. They worship it. They don't take profit as pleasure. They take profit as law, as identity, as salvation. And that's the key difference. The Ferengi love profit because they like the comfort that comes with profit, right? They like to show off their luxury and they love living, right? The Corpus take profit as identity and, you know, they worship it. So it's like as they said, the Corpus are what the Ferengi pretend to be. I think there was one brief. The Ferengi rep didn't even sit down. He paced. They build fast. They build in bulk. They sell weapons. They accept resource futures. Pause. They are beautiful. An assistant frowned. They are terrifying. He waved that off. Same thing in good markets. And what makes it even more interesting and more terrifying is when the Federation finds out that the Corpus are human. Another one it said, okay, this is exactly why how the Corpus would crack the Federation market wide open. Because Starfleet and Federation planets don't behave like a cash economy. A lot of them run on allocate, runs into a wall. If there's no latinum, how do we do business? But the Corpus, they don't actually worship currency. They worship profit. And profit is broader than money. Profit equals net gain. And net gain can be measured in anything. So the Corpus will happily take payment in raw materials, industrial output, and data. That's another difference between them. What does the Ferengi want? The Ferengi want gold pressed latinum. The Corpus want profit. And that could mean mining rights to your moon, your dilithium rich moon for 6 years. Czar. You can't sell this. You shouldn't trade that. You should give it away. You should join us. To the Corpus, this sounds like stop being a functional civilization. The Corpus are doing what Parvos originally preached. Work, compensation, stability. They aren't asking Starfleet to become Corpus. They aren't trying to forcibly convert them. They're doing something much more practical. You have needs, we have goods. We can exchange. That's not evil. And that's what makes it so cool. Like I said, one of the reasons I absolutely love this whole crossover is because you're not dealing with two evil societies. You're dealing with two very different societies that come from different circumstances. What makes the Corpus is what the society and the world that formed the Corpus. The Corpus comes from a world. they want money, and they go after money because they want to have luxury. They want to show off what they have. To them, money is, a luxury they want to have. The Corpus literally worship profit. They will sacrifice anything and everything for profit. It runs their entire life. Down to, we will genetically engineer our children and have them born out of artificial wombs, because we pursue profit. If profit demands that we make sacrifices, we will make sacrifices. The Ferengi, while they want profit, aren't willing to sacrifice everything in the name of profit. But like I said, the Corpus come from a very different world. They come from a world where scarcity is the norm. Where if you go on these planets, right, the Earth was poisoned by the Grineer. The Grineer, have a lot of the planets, right? So the Corpus came through a world of scarcity. Where does Parvus Granum start out? Parvus Granum starts out in poverty. He creates a world where they were denied entrance because they were not Orican. So Parvus Granum was like, you will earn through merit, right? So the Corpus, first of all, are more open and welcome to anybody who's willing to work as a part of the Corpus. That's why they allow Elias Halverson to become a member of the Corpus. Not exactly a member. He's more of an employee of the Corpus, right? But they come from a world of scarcity. So everything they do is understandable. If what I read is true, and the Grineer are on the level of Warhammer 40k Space Marines, then you can understand why the Corpus will genetically engineer their people and have them carrying weapons and enhancing their weapons, because they're constantly fighting the Grineer. So the Corpus come from a world where they need to exist the way they do in order to survive. And there's this whole conversation where at one point he tells them he can't deny that they've survived, that the Corpus has survived circumstances that the Federation cannot even begin to understand. That they have gone through and survived at least 1,000 years, probably longer, probably much longer than 1,000 years. The Corpus have survived over 1,000 years and survived circumstances that the Federation cannot even begin to imagine. And so they why they exist the way they do makes sense. They're not evil, but they have to be harsh in order to survive. Starfleet, on the other hand, comes from a world of basically, the best way that this puts it is this. The Corpus believe that you earn your value, right? You don't have any inherent value. The Federation believes that every single person has a... Yeah. Basically, the Ferengi parade around and pretend that profit is everything, but to them, luxury, goods, owning things is more important. The Corpus are willing to go basically to own absolutely nothing and work themselves half to death in the name of profit, and make everything a sacrifice for that. Like when I said, one of my favorite moments is when he tells them this. Tezin's voice turned colder but still controlled. Then you will learn, Tezin said, that the Corpus do not require your permission to survive. Tezin stood. He looked down at Halverson. I have answered your question, he said. Then he said something that wasn't a threat. It was a truth. My ship cannot eat your virtue, Tezin said. If you want peace with us... He paused. Stop asking us to starve. And that's the most interesting part about the whole thing. Is the fact that they're actually, when you really look at it, right? In dealing with the Federation, the Corpus are being ridiculously reasonable in a way. I mean, this one is the best. He's like, I think I've already read this, but this is brilliant. What does Starfleet call it, Tezin said, when you demand my civilization change to meet your morals? Halverson's stomach tightened. He didn't want to say it. Tezin said it for him. Imperialism, Tezin said quietly. Silence. Kip looked down. Taket's eyes widened slightly. Halverson stared at Tezin. That's not what we're doing. Tezin didn't argue. He asked a question instead. What do you offer us, Tezin said, if we abandon what makes us Corpus? Halverson swallowed. Membership, he said. Tezin nodded. Membership, he repeated. In exchange for obedience. Halverson flinched slightly. Tezin's voice stayed even. You will require we abandon genetic engineering, Tezin said. Halverson didn't answer. Tezin continued. You will require we abandon our board, our profit religion, our hierarchy, our market structure, our methods. Halverson's voice was quiet. The Federation isn't a religion. Tezin's mouth twitched faintly. No, Tezin answered. It is a faith. You just pretend it is logic. Halverson stared. Tezin leaned back. Dr. Halverson, Tezin said, you ask what Starfleet expects of the Corpus. He let the question breathe. Then he answered it himself. Starfleet expects the Corpus to become Federation, Tezin said softly, and because we cannot, he paused, Starfleet will eventually expect us to die. Halverson's eyes widened. That's not... Tezin held up a hand. It is not malice, Tezin said calmly. It is arithmetic. Halverson went very still. Tezin finished with quiet precision. You do not want to kill us, he said, but you want a galaxy where civilizations like ours do not exist. He leaned forward slightly, and the galaxy does not care what you want. Long silence. Then Halverson spoke carefully, voice raw. So what do you propose, he asked. Tezin tilted his head. I propose we trade. Truly trade. Not morality, not shame, not superiority, trade. Halverson frowned. And the weapons? Tezin nodded calmly. Export models, limited capability, profit-driven, not our best. Halverson exhaled. That is the best thing ever, because it's true. I cannot get over, I absolutely love the line. He tells them the truth. And that's what happens in Star Trek, which is interesting. Everyone who goes up against the Federation in Kurtzman-verse, in the Kurtzman universe, everyone in the Kurtzman universe that goes up against the Federation eventually dies. But that's what makes it boring. Whereas in this case, he tells them, he's like, you don't, when it comes down to it, right? Original Star Trek had people that did not agree with the Federation. They had the Romulans. The Klingons were an enemy for a while. They had people that did not agree with the Federation. And they were allowed to exist. Now, they get rid of everybody who doesn't agree with the Federation. So, when it comes down to it, the Corpus cannot join the Federation. It is impossible. There are billions, if not trillions of Corpus, and all of them have been genetically engineered. What are they going to do about it? They're all criminal. I mean, how did they treat Julian Bashir? Right? How did they treat Julian Bashir when they found out he was genetically engineered? They nearly criminalized him. They put his parents in prison, basically, for genetically engineering him. So you have an entire society that goes against your laws. What are you going to do with them? You can't have them join the Federation without abandoning even if they abandoned everything that makes them Corpus. They're still genetically engineered. They're not welcome. The 16-year-old or 14-year-old Corpus teenager cannot join Starfleet Academy. He's smart. He's on the prodigy level of intelligence. And he has a lot of weaknesses too, which is great. Because, thank God. Oh my God, finally. Thank God. It's like, imagine if the Republic came across an entire society that's of billions of people who are all Jedi, and they don't want Jedi. So that's what makes it so really, really interesting, because he's right. He's like, you don't want us to exist. But what are you going to do about it? We exist. Are you going to kill all of us? You don't want the Corpus to exist. because the Corpus cannot change to fit the Federation. They can't. What are they going to do? Wipe out their entire society because they're genetically engineered? Every Corpus is genetically engineered. They have breeding programs. What are they going to do? And that's what makes it even more interesting, is the idea that you have the Federation is more discriminatory than the Corpus. As Elias puts it to his captain, the Federation doesn't want the Corpus to stop hurting people. It wants them to stop being Corpus. Chen went still, Vale's mouth opened, then closed. Halverson continued quieter now. And the Corpus, he said, they don't feel oppressed. Chen's brow furrowed. They're proud, Halverson said. They believe profit is virtue. Work is holiness. Strength is responsibility. They believe hierarchy makes sense. They believe you earn your value. Chen looked shaken. Vale whispered, but it's cruel. Halverson's expression softened slightly. Yes, he said, it can be, but it's also coherent. It functions. It survives. Yeah, and imagine now you have an entire society of people, because there are less Jedi than there are Corpus. There are more Corpus than there are Jedi. So the Federation are willing to use the Corpus to fight the Grineer. They're willing to use them as, basically the Corpus are fighting side by side with them, and yet they will never treat them as equals. The funny thing is, the Corpus is willing to accept the Federation as equals. If a Starfleet officer approached the Corpus and said, I want to join the Corpus will say yes. And you don't even have to have information. You don't even have to be selling your Starfleet security clearance or any of that. A Starfleet officer can go to the Corpus and say, I want to join. I am leaving. Elias doesn't leave Starfleet. Elias is like a bridge between the two. He still works for Starfleet, and he's now a part of Becco. And they acknowledge that he goes back and forth between the two. Elias is still Starfleet. But if a Starfleet officer were to go to the Corpus and say, I want to join the Corpus, they will give them the genetic modifications. They will enhance them and allow them to be a part of the Corpus. But the Federation will never do that. And it comes up because Tiket Taro is like 14 or 15. He's very smart. He's a child prodigy. I created him on purpose. I know people always call prodigies Mary Sue's, which is why I created a prodigy, because they exist. But you have to do them well. And Tiket has a lot of flaws. For example, he's very good in the hard sciences, but he would fail Starfleet Academy. He's very good in engineering, and he's very good in the hard sciences. But everything else he's terrible at. He would fail Starfleet. Because all of the counseling, the bedside manner, the psychology, he does not understand. In fact, it's pretty much, we determined that the Corpus have a very low emotional intelligence quotient. He would fail. He's also very bad at writing, and his way of logic is he will jump steps. So when he writes something, he assumes you understand, and he jumps. So he'll go from 1 to 5 to 7. And so every single time Elias looks at him, he's like filling it with going, yeah, you missed this. I don't understand what you're talking about here. He would fail at Starfleet. He's a child prodigy, but he would fail at Starfleet because he has flaws. And that's very important with a child prodigy. The other thing is he still is a child. And so he does a lot of childish things that make him a child. But at one point, he looks at him, and Elias is having a conversation with his father. So the chief medical officer is talking to his father. And his father says the kid would be great in Starfleet. And Elias tells him he can't. He's like, is he? So the father's like, is he unqualified? Now at the time they don't know he would suck at Starfleet ethics. Makes absolutely no sense to him. He's failed, he's tried multiple times to pass Starfleet ethics and has failed 5 times, right? But at the time, his father says he's very smart. He would do very well. And Elias says he's genetically engineered. And so his father says, well, when was it? He's like, he was 7. He was done when he was a child. So it's like Starfleet is condemning him because he was genetically modified. And that's really the wild part about it, is that everyone thinks of the Federation as this open and welcoming and inclusive, right? And yet you have an entire society that would be completely banned for something that they didn't even, it's like the norm. It's like you have an entire society of people with red hair, and the Federation says, well, we don't like red hair, you're banned because you have red hair. But the funniest thing is, I agree with you on that one. Rey would be better. I preferred Finn. That's one of the reasons I was disappointed. Finn would have been a much better Jedi. The whole thing was so disappointing. Finn was a better character. I liked Finn if he was done right. But no, I totally agree with you. And the funniest part, though, is, so at one point, so the Corpus and the Federation, the Starfleet vessel, are working together. So after it was discovered that the Corpus are lacking immunity, the Corpus agreed to work with the Federation to fight the Grineer. So the USS Athena is sticking with the Corpus pillar ship. And when they do joint operations, they have a joint sickbay. Okay? And the Federation, because they're using Corpus weapons, Starfleet is using Corpus weapons, they're allowed to have joint combat training things. Now, you know what chief medical officers are like. They're all like, you can't use live rounds, all about, resting and all of that. So the funniest part of the whole thing is Corpus medicine is better than Starfleet medicine. So every time the Starfleet officers are training on the Corpus ship, if they're ever injured, in general, if they can avoid it, whenever they have the opportunity, they will always go to the Corpus doctors first. Because Corpus medicine is faster, more efficient, and has them on their feet faster. On top of that, the Federation, the Starfleet officers told the Corpus doctors there's something called doctor-patient confidentiality, okay? That means that Elias, the chief medical officer of the Athena, right, does not have access to the majority of their medical file. So all of a sudden, his sick base drops by like 60-70%. He's like, they're still doing training, but nobody's reporting to sick bay. And when he looks at Starfleet officer's medical record, right, he sees gaps in them. And he's like, so he confronts them and they're like, you're not my physician, right? You're not my attending physician. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm the chief medical officer. And he's like, yes, I went to the Corpus doctor. He's my attending physician. And so it's just, he's sitting there in his sick bay with no patients because everybody's going to the Corpus. I don't think, honestly, I wasn't even a fan of The Force Awakens. Because I don't like... So... Because chief medical officers can be a bit of a pain in the butt. And in fact, they tease him. At one point, he gets really, really annoying. And so now it's an ongoing thing where every time he goes into engineering, they shout, Chief Medical Officer on deck. And he's like, at one point, someone goes up to him, a lieutenant in engineering. He's like, Commander Halverson, I want to be a chief medical officer just like you. But yeah, I mean, and it makes sense. You can't blame them. What is he going to do? They are allowed to report to the Corpus doctors. Especially in joint operations between Starfleet and the Corpus, the Starfleet officers are allowed to go to the Corpus doctors. So Elias can't go to the captain. It's like, they don't like me. They go to the Corpus doctors. He can't. What is he going to tell them? That, like I said, they go to the Corpus over me? Either, for convenience. So he just sits in his empty sick bay and nobody wants to report to him. Kylo Ren at all. I really did not like him. He did not strike me as a leader. He did not strike me as even though he's a Jedi, a Sith, whatever. Anakin Skywalker, when he became Darth Vader, was menacing, right? He was menacing. He was hard. You know, he was terrifying, right? Kylo Ren was a spoiled brat and annoying and just plain an unpleasant character overall. Anakin became... Yeah, I mean, he killed a whole bunch of kids at the beginning, right? He was terrifying. You looked at Anakin, you're like, yeah, you don't mess with him. Kylo Ren was a child with daddy issues. And that's the problem. And I mean, in my whole thing, the Corpus don't come across as perfect. They have their flaws. At one point, he goes on leave and finds out that his pay is docked because he was on leave for 2 weeks because he ended up
break into the network.
And it's like, and the chief medical officer's like, you get.
I can't do this without you.
And he's like, yeah. Wait a minute, Vader told Kylo to go to the... That makes absolutely no sense.
Here is a terminal.
That's dumb.
And get ready to defend. This will only get more difficult. Get to a terminal and prepare for enemy resistance.
That doesn't make sense at all. I forgot about that. Look, I watched each one of those movies once. So I'll admit I don't remember much of them. Okay, I watched Force Awakens in theaters, and the other 2 I watched at home. I don't remember. I don't plan on watching them again. I agree with what Neon and Goofy Sparkle say. The whole idea of apathy is the worst thing. It's sort of like... Yeah.
Still working on it. Continue to defend.
But then it's the same thing with it's all. It's basically they don't know how to write people. I mean that's why, for example, when and yes, I do use AI when I'm writing things and I change my mind and I go back and forth, because I have it. Like, okay, does this fit the character? This is consistent. I've repeatedly said, is this a child? You know, because especially a child prodigy. A child prodigy is ridiculously hard to get right because they will come across very easily as a Mary Sue. You have to be very careful with a child prodigy. Can become Mary Sue.
Terminal spotted.
I'm always going over it and over it and over it. I'm like, okay, no, they can't write people well.
Stay focused. There's a heavy unit approaching.
Like, I at one point had it, multiple times I've had AI go over everything I've done, and I'm like, okay, does this fit the canon of Warframe and the canon of Star Trek? And it admits, haven't gone out of your way to make something that doesn't make, like the whole, I'm not in heat argument, right? That fits. It fits the Corpus. The Corpus would be like, we've been alerted that they do these things. And so we'll make an advisory to our doctors and crew to be aware that humans... And the Starfleet doctor getting it would be like... The whole thing makes sense. It fits the character, it fits the lore, it fits the canon. It's believable. You can see this Corpus with a pad looking at him going, are you experiencing heat, Commander Halverson?
We are finished here.
And my stupid Warframe Star Trek crossover is better than most of the more modern stuff.
Location
it's stupid.
Reached.
It makes
Drop me in
it's like, how does
defend our
Warframe end up in the world of Star Trek? Right? Makes sense. Especially the security officers who tend to be the more gung-ho, who be like, okay.